Hello and welcome to another video tutorial Monday. This week I wanted to make a fun card using watercolor pencils, and I wanted to show you a little bit with how to use them and then make a fun card with them. So I have these watercolor pencils available from Simon Says Stamp. They're by Lowe & Cornell, and they come in a pack of 24, I believe, and they're pretty inexpensive too. They're about $15 or something like that. So I wanted to give them a try. I've never had watercolor pencils before, so I thought this would be a good starter set. And if it's something I really like, I might invest in a more expensive set. But for now, this is going to work just fine. So what I'm going to start out by doing is making a background that's kind of like darker around the edges and fades in towards the middle. And I'm going to use these two blue colors. And I'm going to stamp the word love from this Paper Smooches stamp set. It's from the Word Salad stamp set, and this will be really fun to color in with these watercolor pencils. So the first thing I'm going to do is stamp it. Now you have to use a waterproof ink, so I'm using StazOn, and I'm just using the black color. And I'll stamp it right about here. And the reason why I'm stamping it first is because I want to mask off this area so that it stays without color in it. There we go. That was lucky. And you know what? I usually just clean off my my stamp by just putting a little bit of water on it and then rubbing it with a rag. Even though it stays on, it's going to stain the stamp, but it's just fine as long as you get it off with the rag. It's not going to stamp on your next project or anything like that, so it'll be fine. Plus, I've heard there's some issues with the StazOn cleaner and ruining stamps over time, so I like to just use water. I know water's safe. So now that I have my love stamped, I'm going to use this art masking fluid from Winsor & Newton. I've had this for a really long time, actually, from my watercoloring days. So you can pick it up at any art store. I'll make sure to link to a source on my blog. And I'm just going to use kind of an older paintbrush and get some of that fluid on here. And then just paint over where my sentiment is. And this, it will work like rubber cement almost, where you can roll it off with your finger when you are done. So I'm just going to paint over this area so that it stays nice and white. And make sure you go and clean off your brush right away, otherwise it'll gunk up the brush. So I'll be back in just a sec. So now that my masking fluid has had time to dry, I've just let it dry for about 2 minutes or so, now I can start adding my watercolor to the edges. So that I found that the best way to add it to a large area is to actually put it on with the pencil. So I'm going to go relatively dark around the edges and then kind of pick up my pencil and make it lighter towards the center. So kind of like this all the way around the card. And what this will do is give us some watercolor to work with when we get it wet. So just try to make it even and not have any like crazy dark lines next to a crazy light line or something like that. But really, this is really forgiving and it'll turn out looking great every time. It just takes a little bit of work to get used to. So I'm going to go around the edges and just keep doing this. And to the corners, I'm going to add this darker blue color just to bring in some depth and dimension to it. And this will just add some nice flair and a little bit more diversity in the color. So when we mix this all together, it'll give us a really pretty effect. So I'll probably have this go out to right about here and then continue around the entire card with the teal. So I'll be back in a second. I'm just going to speed this up so you can see how I color this all in. Alright, and by the way, these colors are Viridian and Light Panned Blue. And you know what, I really like how this is looking even before I add the water. I almost am tempted to just keep it like this, but I will add the water because I know it'll look even better once I add it. So I'm just using my little spritzer here filled with regular water, and I'm going to spray it on my mat. You can use a water dish for this, but I like my mat because you can really regulate how much water you're getting onto your brush, and you can always add more, take some away, and things like that. So I'm using this brush, and I have the entire brush set from Claudine Helmuth. This is the 1/2 inch brush, and I'm just going to start out by working from the edge and kind of lightly rubbing it towards the middle and picking up more water, and then kind of just letting it fade out towards the middle. And then you can go back and just kind of keep going until it looks exactly how you want it. You just rub it until the pencil lines are gone, and the more water you add, the lighter it will get. And you can rub right over these words here, and it will be just fine. We'll be able to add more color over them later. And yeah, so this is what we're going to do. Just go around the entire card. And if you want to take off some color, you can just make your brush dry and then go back in and kind of pat your paper with the brush, and it will take off that water and with it the color. So just keep adding water, taking off water, letting the water do its thing with the water color pencil. And I'm just going to keep going around this, and we'll speed this up so that you can kind of see what I'm doing and see my process. It really isn't a specific science. I don't have any training in watercolor pencil, and I kind of just like picked it up from watching other YouTube videos and experimenting on my own. So the key is just to keep trying, and try on a piece of scrap paper first, or you know, it's just give it a go and see what happens. So I'm going to keep going around this, and I will be back in a second. Okay, so I've gone around the edges now, and I'm just going to kind of let this dry. You can use a heat gun to make it go a little bit faster, and I might actually do that. And then just set it underneath a book or something like that so that it will flatten out. Or you can just do what I do, since I'm really impatient, and I'll probably just use some really heavy adhesive and adhere it down to my card base. So I will be back in a second after this is dry. Oh, and one more thing. If you want to add some more color, you don't want to color on this after it's wet. It'll tear the paper and you'll be able to see the pencil lines. So I learned this tip from Jennifer McGuire, where she actually takes water on her paintbrush and uses the little paintbrush on the pencil itself, and then adds it to her paper. So that's a really nice way to control the exact amount of color that you're getting, and you can add as much or as little as you want around the edges, and you can go back and do this after it's dried or whatever. Another thing about watercolors is even after you dry this, if you don't like what you see, you can go back in with water, re-wet it, and it will work again. So that's a really cool thing about watercolors. Once they're dry, they're not done. It's not like acrylic paint where all the water evaporates and you can't reactivate it. So that's another thing I really like about watercolors. So I'll be back in a second after this dries. So I've let this dry. I dried it a little bit with the heat gun and kind of dabbed off some with a towel and just kind of added to that whole artsy effect. And now I can go ahead and rub this masking stuff off with my finger, and you'll see it comes off like rubber cement. And it is kind of cute like that, but I want to add a little bit more color. So I think I'm going to add some pink here, and I'm going to just do a nice little gradient, doing some pink, over here, and just kind of fading it out exactly like we did on the edges. And then I'll go in with some purple as well and add a little bit more flair. And now I can add some more water to my craft mat, and I'm going to use the smallest brush from this brush set. And you have to be very precise with this because it's going to want to spread. Watercolor just loves to play and spread out, but do your best to stay in the lines and kind of just get it activated within those little boundaries. And you do have a little bit of playroom with that thick black border. So just kind of add a little bit of water at a time, and you can always add more water. And I like to make the bolder part fluid first and then kind of work out from there. And if you have any little areas that are kind of bleeding outside the edges, you can go back with a paintbrush and kind of try to pick them up a little bit. So there, that worked pretty well. It's kind of like using your colorless blender and your Copics. Alright, so now that this is dried, I adhered it to this craft cardstock, and now I can just embellish. And I just want a nice cluster of embellishments kind of over here, I think. So I'm going to start with my biggest embellishment, and that's this Vintage Vogue spool button from Pink Paisley. And in order to glue this down, I'm just going to use some glossy accents because I find that this works the best on bulky things, and it'll really hold once it dries. And I can just place this right about here. Just hold it down for a couple of seconds and then it should kind of firm up and stick. And then I want to add this little button. So this is from Hero Art, they're floral buttons. And I just threaded some baker's twine through it. So I'll put that right here. And then this little bow. Can go right here. Actually, I think I want to add something more. So I found this basic gray brad. I'm actually not sure what collection it's from, but I'll make sure to link to it in my blog post. And I really like this one, so I'm just going to use my paper piercer and kind of look where I want to put it right about here. And then I think I'm just going to fill this little hole right here with some glossy accents. Whoa, got a little out of control there. So just a quick fix, I can just scoop this up with a little Kleenex. And the bow will cover most of it anyways, so I'm not too worried about it. I'll just go back in with my finger and kind of dab it to make it matte again. And then I can just add in my bow. And once again, just kind of hold it there for a couple seconds just to make sure it sets up. Alright, and that will set up very nicely, I think. So the last thing I want to do is add some rhinestones underneath the love here. And I'm going to use my X-Acto knife for this and just add these stones from Hero Arts. And I said that was the last thing, but it doesn't really look like it's quite all together yet. So I'm just going to draw a line around the outside of the card with this silver gel pen. This is a Signo pen. And this will mimic the silver that is in the rhinestones. So the colors should go pretty well together. Okay, and I think that silver line really brings it all together really well. And I actually moved up the rhinestones a little bit and then added some smaller ones just to make the sparkle a little bit more apparent. And I really like how this looks. I think it's a really fun experiment in watercolor. And adding that little cluster of embellishments by the love just really gives it a really cutesy, fun feeling. So here's a picture of the finished card. And here's a close-up. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and I will catch you again next week on another Video Tutorial Monday.